Hello and welcome back. In this session, we'll be seeing how to handle a multi-component tray. So up till now, in most of our previous sessions, we've been seeing that the tree that we have, or more specifically, whatever we are building, that mini app or this project, it is usually consisted inside one app component. All right. So this is going to be a little larger session. So I'll try to divide it into two parts. We'll solve a particular set of let's say tasks in two steps, one by one, gradually. At the end of this session, I'm sure you will be able to understand and very much you'll yourself be able to do these sort of splitting this one app into several components and how to use this transfer of data to and from a particular parent component to a child component, and from a child component to a parent component. So what am I talking about and how to deal with all of this? Let's head into our code sandbox in order to understand this in a better fashion. So this one that we have is actually nothing but a copy of a sandbox that we left from our previous session. Okay, and up till now we have tried to keep our component tree pretty simple with only one app component. All right, so in order to make this clear, this index.js, we put all our code inside one app.js, and even the initialization of several functions and all the elements that we have, we used to write them all under this one app.jsx. But honestly, that's not how a React app turns out to be. So we should always want to separate this into several components. For example, if you see inside this return statement, we have several different parts of this little project. All right, so let's say one part could be consisting of the heading part. The another part could consist of this particular div, for example, that consists of the input field and the add button. And let's say another part could consist of this entire unordered list that keeps on adding as we go on adding tasks into this. Okay, so the reason for which we look for this separation, all right, so why do we want to separate it out? There must be a question in someone's mind. So the reason for this is to make our app scalable, because as of now, let's say you only are able to see 3 different layers or 3 different parts of this app. But what if this app of yours is now having 100 such parts, and those 100 such parts have X number of subparts with them? So that will be very difficult to manage under a single component. And that's the basic reason why React follows this concept of splitting your project into several easy to understand and simple components and then reintegrating it back in order to form a larger project. So before we start working in this, let's create our own copy of this, and let me call this part1. Okay, so now we are inside app.jsx of ours, and let's say I want to take out this list component. All right, so inside this to-do list app, I want to take this out into a separate component and make this work. All right, you know how to create external components and how to render them inside a parent component. So pause this now and try to achieve this yourself. All right, so let's say this separate component, I call it list item.jsx. Okay, so inside this list item, the first thing that we need to do is to import our React from React modules, and then we'll create a function with the same name, list item, like this, and we'll export this list item as a default. Then let's import it back into our app.jsx. We'll import this list item from list item like this. Now if you get here up till this particular point, now what is the next step that we need to do? So basically the next step is that inside this tasks.map method of ours, we want to have a separate component for these list tags. All right, so let's try to cut this out. And for example, in here I want to return these list elements. Let's not mention what we are actually returning. And inside this app.jsx, what we want to do is, in here, let's use a custom component. So we all know how to make use of these custom components. You wrote some code inside an external component, you imported it, that particular function, and then you mention it as your own custom tag like this. Okay, but the thing is that this list that we have inside this list item, we want it to display these individual tasks. All right, so how do we pass this data from this parent component to its child component? And the answer is we can make use of props. Okay, so for example, we say that we create a property called text and we make it equals to this individual task like this. And once we head over inside this list item.jsx, we know that we will be receiving the data that we have set there as a prop inside this. And in order to access it, we can write prop.list item like this. And once we hit save to both of them, you can cross check that whether this is working fine or not. Okay, this is not getting displayed. Let's try to move it like this. In here, if we write something and we click the button, okay, what's the issue? This app is not, the item is not getting displayed here. Let us check using our React developer tools. So this task A is getting printed inside this, and what we want is we are returning a list element like this, and inside this unordered list we are having this to-do list item in which we are mentioning that we are keeping a property of text equals to this. Now let's take a look. Okay, we have a warning here about the key property. We'll talk about this later. Okay, so actually the problem is, I've seen that in here using autocorrect, actually we have to refer to this text. All right, but somehow I didn't know, when I pressed enter, it selected this list item. The functionality is that we mentioned these individual tasks under this prop named text, and then it is getting passed over here, receiving it as a prop, and for every new list element we create, we want to access this via prop.text, and we can cross check it further by trying to add several tasks. You can see they are working just fine. So this basically was a simple demonstration of something we have already studied, and that was splitting your app into several components. Now list item of yours, this as of now is a stateless component. Okay, which means that it is not changing or updating anything here. It is just displaying this prop which is read only. Okay, so what do I mean when I say this prop is read only? Which means it means that if in this component you try to update or modify this prop, it won't work. If you want, you can try it out, but this prop is supposed to be read only. So but what we can have instead is we can have state inside these components. All right. So let's try to do this. So for example, let's say what I want to do is, if I'm adding a task here, for example, task A. Now what I want is, as soon as I click over this particular task, I want it to get crossed like this. And what do we call this crossing of this text? We call it line through. All right. So I want this text to get a strike through it once I click it. And for example, if I click it again, then it should unstrike itself. Okay. If I click it once, a cross line should appear over it. And if we click on it again, the line should disappear. So you must remember that this particular task can be achieved via the text decoration under CSS, and inside this the line through property. So how can we do it? I know that we have studied about this before, so I would recommend you to pause this now and give it a try whether you are able to achieve this or not. All right guys, so the first thing that we know is we can make use of inline styling here. Okay, and in order to access it, I'm going to write style equals to, and then we'll create a JavaScript object in which we'll talk about text decoration. Always remember that since we are writing it inside these braces, we have to use the camel case notation. And then I'm going to mark this equals to, STHROUGH. So why this? I have used inline styling in CSS and marked this text decoration as line through, which means that if I'm gonna add a text, it should get strike through. So let us try to check this out. Now if I add a task in here, so as soon as I click this add button, you can see that my task is now getting strike through. But this is not what we wanted to achieve, right? We want it to be rendered conditionally. All right, and the condition based on which we want this line to come here is the clicking of this element. Okay, so that means that we have to use that property of on click. All right, so let's say I wrap this inside like this, my return statement, and let's wrap this list element inside a div, because we'll be adding several lines there. And then when we are talking about the on click method, so you can use it either on this list element or over this div. Either of them will work. So I'm gonna write that on click method over this div of mine, and then via this on click I am going to call a function as soon as I click something called handle click. So let's initialize this function handle click. And for this handle click function, now what we need to do is we need to use a particular boolean, all right, in order to mark it as a flag for whether that particular text should be strike through or not. So I'm going to create a flag as a stateful constant here, and I'm gonna call its setter set flag, and then using the use state hook, let's initially set it to false. So our boolean, the marker that we have, is called flag, and initially we want to set this flag as false. Okay, now what we want to do inside this handle click is, like, once we added a particular task here, now as soon as I click this, we know that on click function will fire up and handle click function will get called. And inside this handle click function, we will make use of this set flag setter, which is used to update this flag of ours. And what do we want to do with this flag? We will first make use of the previous value of this flag. Alright, now you have two options. Either you can make use of the if-else condition and check whether the previous version that you have of this flag, if it is consisting or if it's equals to true, then you're gonna make it false, and if it is false, you can make it true. But there is a very shorter way to do it, and that is, since we are only talking about two things, we can actually return the opposite of whatever was initially there, which means that if now I'm calling this set flag setter that works on this flag constant, if we call it, it's gonna take the previous value. Remember, since we are making a call via this arrow function, and since we have only one parameter, that is why we are free to remove these parentheses. Alright, so don't learn a wrong syntax if you keep seeing me using this pref value without any parentheses. This is an optional one, and while returning it, what we are doing is we are simply switching or flipping its value. So if it is true, this is actually the not operator, so it will turn true to false and false to true. So the next thing that is left is we want to check that, okay, you want to set text decoration. So I am writing turn the operator now. If this flag is true, I want the text decoration to be line through, and in case this text decoration, in case this flag is false, I want the text decoration to be equals to none. Okay, let's hit save, and then let me repeat. So what we basically did was we created a boolean, a stateful boolean called flag, and then we applied inline styling. We binded this handle click function with the on click method. As soon as we click on a particular task, this function will execute. The set flag setter will take the previous value of the flag, which is initially false, and let's say we are considering the fact that we are clicking on that task for the first time, so it will return the opposite value, which means if it is initially false, it will return true. Then it will check that inside this inline styling, if our flag is true, then the text decoration will be equals to line through, which means the strike through will be there. And if this flag is false, which it is initially, the text decoration will be equals to none. So let's say now I make a task. So you can see initially, since this flag is false, so text decoration is coming as none. Now if I click this up, this on click should fire. So you can see as soon as I click this function executed and the flag value is flipped to true, and if I click it again, it is flipped to false, and then true, false, true, false. So basically one flag is able to achieve our task here. Okay, so by doing this, we can see that this list item of ours has a state now, but this state is a localized state. Okay, it is not going anywhere else apart from this list item component. For example, what if when we clicked on this task of ours, instead of striking it through, let's say we want to delete it from this tasks array of ours, because we know that all of these tasks that we keep creating, they actually get saved inside this tasks array, right? What if I want to delete a particular task upon clicking on it? How do we reach from this child component up to its parent component? So the child component is list item. So is there a method via which I can actually go up one level over to its parent component, which is the app component, and be able to change this tasks array? So to be clear, what I'm basically trying to say is, for example, we have these n number of tasks here, okay, and then we click on one per task here. For example, we click on this middle one. So what we want is that this particular task gets deleted from the list, from this list of tasks, and the remaining tasks here should be unaffected. Okay, so we'll see how this particular thing works. Can we, are we, or would we be able to achieve this with all the concepts that we have already studied? So I would like to end the part 1 of this session with this question in mind, which we will answer in part 2. So that will be all from my side for sure, and I'll see you with an answer for this particular question in the very shortly in the next session, the part 2 of handling component tree.